What's up everybody, Rob here from the Basement Bike Shop, and in this video I'm going to show you how I install V-brakes on a BMX bike. I'm also going to show you how to remove the cantilever brakes before installing the V-brakes, in case your bike has cantilever brakes installed already. Now V-brakes get mounted to V-brake post or cantilever posts, which are different than your U-brake post, where the U-brake post is located more by the tire and the brake pads are below it. The V-brake posts are located more by the spokes and the brake pads are above it. Now V-brakes usually have a linear coil spring combination where it's a coil spring on the bottom and it comes up to a linear spring that goes into your brake arm. They'll also come with the brake pads, the bolts, and the V-brake noodle. Now sometimes it'll come with two different noodles at different angles depending on the angle that your brake cable comes into the brake. You'll also need a brake cable. I think it's always a good idea to install a new cable every time I install new brakes. I picked these up at my local bike shop. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is remove the cantilever brakes that are on the bike. Now we'll start by disconnecting the cable. There's a quick release disconnect on one side, and then the other side you'll just loosen the bolt. Then we'll move the cable over in the Y piece for the cantilever brakes. We'll be able to remove the Y piece. Now if you're going to slide it out of the old cable, it's a good idea to clip the end just so it doesn't tear up the inside of the tube on the Y piece. If you'd like to know more about cantilever brakes and the installation of cantilever brakes on a BMX bike, you can check out my installing cantilever brakes video. There'll be a link on the screen now, or there'll be a link in the description. After that, we're just going to loosen the brakes on the posts and then remove the brakes and the bolt. Sometimes if they've been on there a while, you got to do a little wiggling to get them off. It's always a good idea to keep your posts lubed up and clean of any burrs. Check if there are any burrs and maybe run a little fine sandpaper on them so that they're nice and smooth. Now remove the cable already completely. We're going to start from just bare no brakes. Now a lot of times with V-brakes they tell you that you need to install a new V-brake lever. Can you do it without installing it? Yes, but you're going to have less pull range, so your brakes have to be closer and your rim has to be straighter. The next thing we're going to do is install the V-brake arms. Now the spring has a little nub that sticks out from the bottom, and there's a lot of times 3 holes in the frame. And that's so you can get just the proper tension, and in case you have to tension the brakes against each other to get them pull evenly, you can move one position and then micro adjust from there. So we're going to pick the middle position. That's what we're going to go with. And we'll install them both there, and then if we can't get them to pull evenly, then we'll move one of the brake arms and then micro adjust. Now before I hook up my cable, I like to adjust my brake pads. If I can take the tension off the spring when I do it, like I can with these linear spring brakes, I do. Just so I can hold it to the rim, get it at the angle that I want it. Which a lot of times I want it just so the front of the brake pad hits slightly before the back. It'll prevent it squealing too much, and also just as it pulls the torque on the brakes toward the wheel, it'll still hit flat instead of just skipping across the back of it. Yeah, I think that made sense. Then we're going to put the brake bolts in and tighten these brakes down. Then we're going to hook the springs in, give them tension, get ready to run our cable. Now this frame has a split housing system, so it runs bare cable along the frame, so we'll need to cut two sections of housing. So we'll start at the front of the bike, measuring the housing against the frame to see how much slack we want in the front. And then we'll mark it with our finger, and then we'll cut it there. Now if you don't have a cable cutters, which I lost mine, you can use a side cutters. You just have to make sure that the metal on the inside, if you're using a coiled brake cable housing, doesn't get in the way of the cable sliding through the center. If so, you might have to go in there and cut a little bit and adjust. Next, I'm going to put the inner cable through, and I'm going to hook the whole front end up and then work on the back. You can cut all the housing lengths first if you wanted to, and then run the cable all the way to the back. It's up to you. This is just how I do it. But I cut that bad end off the cable when we're not using. And then I feed the cable into the housing. Now if your cable doesn't go into the ends of the housing, you can always take a pick and just open it up a little bit. And then don't forget to put your ferrules on. Make sure that the right ferrules, that they fit into the cable stops. And then I feed the cable in. When people ask me if I lube my cables at all with different cable glides or waxes and stuff, and I found that it didn't really make a difference. The more I tried different waxes and lubes, it just attracted more dirt and dust to my cable, which meant I was replacing it at the same rate. So now I just, once a year, once every 2 years, when they start to feel bad, I just replace the whole cable. So then we lock the cable into the lever with the housing, the cable stop, and then run it through the cable stops in the frame. And then we're ready to work on the back of the bike. So the next thing we're going to do is measure the back cable housing. Now instead of going from the cable stop there to the other one in the frame like you would with Canties, you have to go to the brake. Now make sure you include the noodle in this length, because that's what the cable is going into. Now this is a little more difficult because you have to kind of hold it in the frame, hold the noodle in the brake, hold the brake somewhat together or into place. I disconnected my springs so that they would just flop against the wheel, gave me a more accurate measurement. And then like the last one, mark it with your thumb, and then cut the housing. And then if you need to, use a pick to make sure that the ends are open. Then I'll just test slide it through. Make sure that it goes through smoothly. Gonna move my cable a little bit, like a what the pick would do if you don't have one. Then I'll pull it out, put my ferrule on. Now if you can't put a ferrule on the end that goes in the noodle because it won't fit in, that's okay. The noodle is supposed to act like a ferrule itself. And then I put the cable housing into the cable stops on the frame, and then I run it through the noodle. And then we're almost ready to hook up our brake and adjust it. So once the cable's through the noodle, we're going to put it into the slot where it sits in the one brake arm and run it through the cable stop on the other brake arm. Right now I have the springs disconnected just to let me pull it right to the tire. Then I'll pull it away a little bit to give it just a little bit of slack. And then I'll tighten it down. Now I can still take some of the slack out by the barrel adjuster that's on the lever. Then after I lock the springs in, I like where it's sitting, I'll tighten it down all the way. Pull to make sure we have good pull distance on the lever. And then it's time to adjust the brake pads. Now for some reason on these brakes my spring keeps popping out. So I'm going to take a zip tie and just zip tie my spring to the arm to make sure it can't pop out of the little ledge that it's supposed to be sitting in. So now for the adjusting part. We're going to pull the lever a couple of times, see which arm is moving more than the other, and then add tension to the spring on the side that's not moving, or take tension away from the side that is moving a lot more, just so we can get an even pull. Now if you can't get it within the right tension just using the micro adjust screws, you may have to take an arm off and either move it into a different slot on the frame, one up or one back, and then micro adjust again. And that about wraps it up for this video. Thanks for watching. If you like what I'm doing, hit that subscribe button. I'll keep these videos coming. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, you can leave a comment below or you can send me an email. Thank you.